Hello, everyone. This is Ernie Humphrey. I'm the CEO of Treasury Webinars. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, AI and Cash Management, Hype or Game Changer. Really excited on many fronts today. Really excited about the topic. Also excited to have as my thought leadership partner today, Panax. This is our first collaboration together. And I'm even more excited to have with me today on my webinar Noam Mills. He's the co-founder and CEO of Panax. So before we get into housekeeping items, I'd like to welcome Noam to the webinar. And I'd like, Noam, please give us a little bit about your background and give us a little bit of background about Panax since this is our first webinar together.
Hey Ernie, thanks for having me. Great to be here. So my background is in business and finance. I actually me and my co-founders first encountered the challenge of cash flow management when we were investors at a PE fund, and we saw it on the side of our portfolio companies that suddenly had to be much more diligent about how they manage their cash flows and their forecasting. Later on in my career, actually in my last role, I was a VP of finance myself at a growing company with quite a lot of complexity. And we tried to find a solution to automate our treasury operations. We couldn't find anything that really fit our needs. We only saw some legacy solutions that required lengthy implementations, costly processes, and we needed something that will be much more automated, faster, and easier to use. And when we couldn't find something to fit our needs, that's why we started Panax. So Panax is a cash flow and treasury management platform for lean teams with complex treasury needs. So essentially, we help finance and treasury teams in global companies across industries to manage their cash flow, gain control and full visibility, get proactive insights and notifications, and build and roll an automated cash flow forecast to inform better cash flow decisions.
Okay, Noam, thank you very much. And I love when companies are founded to address a need that that they know all too well. So I certainly appreciate that. Now let's transition to the less exciting housekeeping items. If you're interested in receiving a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, if you didn't ask for one during the registration process, or you'd like a copy of today's presentation, please send an email to ernie@treasurywebinars.com. In order to get your certificate of attendance, I'll need you to answer the polling questions we have today, stay on the narration for the webinar, and also please take the short survey at the end of the webinar. We always strive to improve the ROI we offer you for your valuable time, as we know your time is more valuable than ever and there are more webinars than ever. And we know that we have to keep on getting better, and we can only do that with your assistance. So let's give you a little bit about of a roadmap of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start a little bit of a top level. I think it's really important. So first of all, cash management, why it matters more than ever. I will just talk about what's happening, why it's more important than ever. We'll really touch on some of the dynamics that are going on in our global markets. And then before we dive into the technology discussion, we'll talk about cash management success. So before we start trying to right size technology, what we need to do is really level set, right, on what cash management success looks like. What kind of metrics are we using? And then before we start looking at, right, how we can really optimize our cash management, we should look at some inherent barriers to success. So a lot of times what I find is companies are looking in the mirror, okay, we are at level A, right? We need to get to level B. When they realize that their goal is level B, it looks like Mount Everest. However, when they start looking at what are some of the inherent barriers that exist to that success, they see that with some investment in people and collaboration, we can start to take down some of those barriers, and so it doesn't look nearly as high. And then we just look at what technology and AI and automation can do, right? That journey is really not nearly as difficult as we originally thought. And then we'll bring Noam in and start sharing her amazing expertise, and we'll talk about AI and cash management, do a little terminology set, talk about some key considerations, and then I'll share some survey results on the current state of AI within Treasury. And then Noam is going to share with us a compelling survey that they launched called AI and Automation and Cash Flow Management. We'll talk about the survey results and the implications, and then as always, we'll wrap things up with the role of AI in cash management, the bottom line. I failed to mention in the beginning, if you'd like to ask any questions, please feel free to do so either in the chat area or the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel. If we do not get to your questions during the webinar, we will be happy to follow up with you after the webinar is over. So let's put a little context here around, and I think first and foremost that there's business dynamics and uncertainty with a new political administration. There's a lot going on in many areas with tariffs and many other situations. I just want to share a story. My wife works in procurement at a manufacturing company, and she was just telling me a lot of the challenges that they are having in really just trying to understand what they need to do in terms of their containers. So there's still an awful lot of uncertainty there. So especially if you work in the manufacturing industry or anything that requires parts and is not just a service, there are going to be a lot of dynamics with your supply chain. So that's something that's really important. And let me just stop there and bring in Noam here. Is there any context you want to add around this whole new world of uncertainty?
I think you gave a really great example from your personal life, but really, I heard a good acronym to describe today's geopolitical environment called VUCA. So it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I think that those are four words that really describe the situation we're at, both from a political perspective. You talked about the tariffs and the regime change, interest rates, which in the last couple of years shifted away from the zero zone and are now much more meaningful for cash flow management. But companies need to respond and react and prepare, and that's basically the role of the finance and the treasury team. So I think it's a very interesting era to be in treasury, and I think that having the right tools and processes to support dealing with that VUCA situation is key. And I want to share one example from our experience too. So when the tariffs were announced, we had two interesting and contradicting experiences with the prospects in Canada. So one company we had a call scheduled with, and they said, listen, we have to push it back because we don't know what's going on and we need to figure out first, and we don't have time to look at new tools. And another company actually approached us and was an inbound lead and told us, listen, there are new tariffs coming in. We have to be on top of things and we need to bring in tools, right? So the situation was the same, but how to deal with it, whether it's to panic and kind of freeze or to actually see it as an opportunity to bring in some tools that will help you deal with it. It's all a matter of perspective. So I thought it was pretty interesting.
Great. Thank you for sharing those perspectives. And I know as a listener on webinars, I love when people talk about their real world experiences, and we will certainly have a conversation throughout the webinar today. So just another piece of this and what we just mentioned, that makes cash visibility more important than ever, but also what we'll touch on a bit is the relationships. So our relationships with our suppliers, how we communicate them, our relationship with our customers as well, right? Customers and sales. And so we're going to be seeing increased volatility in the predictability of both AP and AR. So we need to have good relationships in treasury with AP and AR and AP and procurement. And then we got to make sure we help AR and sales align as well. And with the right technology, it gives us that visibility, but also gives us more time, right, to be more strategic. So we're not spending hours and hours trying to understand our cash position and do that cash forecast. And so, as Noam mentioned, this is actually a good time, right, to make that business case to the CFO, right? There's more certainty than ever. Maybe we're on Excel or ERPs, and it's like we need to do better so we can help our company survive and actually thrive in times of uncertainty. The companies that are kind of ahead of the game in terms of technology absolutely have an advantage, and it says there's more volatility in the markets. So let's talk about cash management success. Let's start at a high level here. Just something to think about as you start to go through that process of right-sized technology. And we'll talk a little bit later about, which is kind of a subset, which I think is really important. How do you right-size AI in particular? How do you think about that in a way that's going to be most beneficial to your company? So we start Okay, what are the goals of the Treasury Department, right? And beyond that, or below that, what are the goals of cash management, right? What are those specific metrics that we have? So, how do we leverage, monitor, and manage Treasury success? And key part of that is absolutely visibility. So, into those goals. So, I just want to kind of lay that out there as something that you want to consider. And then as you start to look at, okay, what are some of the inherent barriers, right? We like to look at people, process, and technology. They're all interrelated, but I like people to focus on people and process first, right? And then we start to look at, okay, technology. How does our current technology maybe inhibit our success? And then how can we leverage technology to mitigate or remove the obstacles? And then how can we leverage technology to help us leverage best practices? So when I was in Treasury a long time ago, it was having leading technology was a competitive advantage. So I like to say it's almost a democratization of being a best in class Treasury department. Noam, do you have anything that you want to add on the context around what I just discussed?
No, I think you set it up exactly correct, right? So the topic of today's webinar is technology and AI, but we can't forget that the technology and the AI need to service an end goal, and the goal is the Treasury Department and its goal. So as you said, defining the KPIs and the metrics of how to measure success, and only then thinking through what tools and technologies can help achieve them. That's, I think, you put it perfectly well.
All right. Thank you. So let's just talk about some pain points. So we just discussed, and success is not defined. And I've seen this in survey results. I've done a few surveys year over year and asked my treasury leaders, how do you define success? And I found that there is not a lot of consensus. And I found that a lot of treasury departments still stop at cash forecasting accuracy, which I don't want to comment on it too much. That could be a whole other webinar. To me, what cash forecasting does is it informs, right? It informs better decision making and better strategic planning. So it's not just accuracy. It's like, what do we use the information? How do we communicate that to impact decisions? So if we're looking at people, some of the skills, right? We can have skills gaps in our treasury team. So it's almost like, okay, we want to look at what is treasury success? Does my team have the skills to meet that? And then do we have skills gaps, right? And then how do we address those through training up or new hires? So your skills gaps, you can have technical skills gaps. We'll talk a little bit about that. So we have to have some acumen around technology and AI, or it should just be the soft skills. And I want to say, as I always do, you need to train people on soft skills. Collaboration is not something that people are born with. A lot of times, at least in the US, when I grew up, we talked about collaboration and how to work together, but we talk about that in grade school when we're 12, but then we lose that. And especially in business school and MBA, I did some PhD work. We didn't talk about soft skills. We didn't train soft skills. We didn't train collaboration. I think we all do well to do that with our teams. And then you can have your team dynamics that I would call are out of whack. We got to make sure we're working as a team. We don't have any toxicity. And then we got to make sure our employees are engaged. So there is absolutely a war for talent. We need to make sure that our folks are engaged, and having the right technology is a way to keep your employees engaged, but also to really recruit the best talent. And then in terms of people, if we have them spending too much time on non-value add tasks, right, that is going to make them unengaged. It's going to inhibit our success. And then if we look at processes, if we have manual and paper-based tasks, that's going to cause just inherent barriers. It's going to cause friction in our process. And at the end of the day, what we want to support at our organization is we want to make it easy to work for our suppliers to work with us, and make it easy for our customers to do business with us. And we play a role in that, and our processes absolutely impact that. So we can have no consistency across organization. I call that harmonization of best practices. We'll get into this a little bit later. I've talked about this on my last webinar and upcoming webinar. Silos that exist to fuel process bottlenecks. There's absolutely a lot of inherent silos across cash management that exist within and beyond Treasury. And then we talked about visibility, as it really creates friction And then just when process isn't what it should be, there's inherently a waste of time for those involved. And then we'll talk about technology. And after I make a few points, Noam, I'll let you jump in here. So this is what happened to me when I was in Treasury, and this is what still happens. If your systems dictate your business practices, you are going to have a big problem in many arenas, and it's going to inhibit your company's growth. It's going to impact how you service your customers and your suppliers. So that is really your worst case scenario in terms of your tech stack. If you have systems that don't play well with each other, right? No communication, no collaboration, and if they really create blind spots that matter, that is a problem. And then in general, a tech stack gone wrong, I would say, creates a static environment. So, Noam, do you want to weigh in here a little bit on how folks should look at assessing their systems and current issues that you see in that realm?
Yeah, I think you mentioned visibility in the previous slide, but I think that's the first step, right? To make sure that you have all your systems visible and talking to each other, whether it's your banking data, your ERP, your other financial systems, and beyond that, it's also the soft skills that you mentioned, right? Because at the end of the day, Treasury is in charge of the Treasury processes, but it's not only AP and AR that you mentioned that are relevant for it, but it's also the sales team, more upstream on one hand, and the supply chain or procurement team on the other side. So I think breaking those silos and having systems that one speak with each other to each other, but also visible, and there is a shared kind of a basis for discussion, and it's easy for everyone to see and understand, and that's why visibility is so critical. I think that's the first step to then at the end of the day, everyone's part of the same organization and should be working towards the same goal. So I think that's one of the critical aspects of that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and something I didn't really make all that clear is that in today's world, technology, especially upgrade, it's a big part of the value proposition if this technology facilitates collaboration. So I think that's really important. So let's start to dive in a little bit on some key considerations in AI and cash management. So before we do that, let's go ahead and level set a bit about where your companies are in terms of adopting technology. So let me go ahead and launch our first polling question, asking you to share in which areas your company currently uses AI, and ML is machine learning. And we'll talk a little bit about those definitions in a moment in case that's not all that familiar to you. So again, if you are interested in receiving a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, please go ahead and answer the polling question. I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all the polling question. Only takes a click of a button. I know you're all engaged because we are offering such amazingly compelling content for you today. Again, if you have any questions, please go ahead and drop those in the questions area and or the chat area, and we'll try and get to those if time permitting. So given that it's March Madness in the US, which means basketball, I'm going to give you guys just another few seconds. So I'm going to give you the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's just go ahead and take a quick peek so we can level set our technology discussion. So we have fraud detection is actually a lot higher than cash forecasting, which is interesting. And then we have 61% none of the above. So that is very helpful in setting the stage for our discussion. No, Manny, is this surprising to you at all? What you expected? Do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to see, and I think some of the data we'll share later on shows that while the majority still, and this survey shows that too, aren't using it, there is a lot of curiosity and a strong desire to start adopting solutions. So I think that will be interesting to dig deeper into.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to Noam, and she's going to start us in our discussion AI and Treasury. So let's get started with some basic terminology. So Noam, the floor is yours. Please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Ernie. So yeah, I love that you said the discussion with first the people and the process, and only now we're digging into the technology. And one thing that we see with the recent development, machine learning as a branch of AI has been around for a pretty long time. The ability to use computers to identify patterns and make predictions based out of it, out of this data, has been around for a while. And what we see recently, and some of the very exciting developments with the technology, and specifically with generative AI, is that it helps mitigate one of the major limitations that machine learning had, and that's explainability, right? So we've had models run and find patterns and give predictions, but I think especially for finance and treasury folks, the ability to understand not just what the prediction is, or what the category is of one or another transaction. It's also why, and can I trust that prediction or that categorization. And that's something that the more traditional machine learning models struggle with. And what we see now with generative AI, that they actually create content and can explain the reasoning behind the predictions that they give, or the insights, or categorization. And I think that is one of the major breakthroughs with AI that will help unblock the adoption that we just saw that is still pretty low, because at the end of the day, the credibility of data. I heard someone, a customer once tell me, I'd rather be exactly wrong than approximately right, right? So being very precise and understanding the underlying reasoning is key for Treasury folks, and that's what we're seeing with the generative AI models.
Okay, thank you. Here, let me go ahead.
Right. So if we think about, okay, but how can AI really help? Then we see it in a few major areas. So first of all, efficiency, right? Ernie spoke about the people aspect and the processes, and helping people in the team focus on more value-added tasks, and automating the manual part is key, and that's something that AI can really help drive. Uh, the other thing is identification of risk, and that talks to the fraud piece that was the leading application right now for this webinar participants. But also identifying trends and surfacing insights is something that we really see that AI is helping with. And the third part is forecasting, right? Identifying patterns, and doing it in a complex way, right? Putting it in the context of the business and of the world is something, and explaining the logic behind it is also something. So for cash flow forecasting, it's really a pivotal moment with AI. And then the next few points talk about relationships. I think it connects to the soft skills that Ernie, that you mentioned earlier on, but helping bridge those gaps with both suppliers, customers, as well as within the finance team and beyond, is something that AI with its efficiencies can help. And lastly, we can't really not talk about AI as in and of itself, right? It's everywhere, and it has already happened, and basically every industry is being disrupted and is changing, and I think finance and treasury, and we spoke about the need for explainability and for preciseness. It's a bit lagging some of the other industries, but the future is already here, and no one can afford to ignore it. So that's the last piece, and just as important. And if we take it to a lower level of, okay, what are the processes that happen within the treasury team, and how AI can help in that. So I think it starts from the lower level data collection, processing, categorization, then moves to making the analysis, and taking out the insights, and finally making the decisions and optimizations around liquidity. So what we see with AI is the lower level, and tasks are more easily automated, and eventually what it enables is for teams to focus their time mostly on 4 and maybe a little bit of 3, and using AI for the lower level collection and processing and categorization, and really doing what's more value add for the organization, and focusing on the strategic parts of the value chain of treasury.
Now, can I ask you a question here? So let's just say, like, sometimes I see people, we talk about AI and machine learning, and then we get to generative AI. Where in this process do you see where the generative AI is really starting to make an impact, and where should people be looking more to that?
Yeah, I think all over, but even starting from categorization, right? So we've had models that look at transactions, and I'm talking about the more the traditional machine learning models, and could spit out a category for a transaction in a fairly accurate manner, but without the explainability, right? And what we see now is that with generative AI, we're actually able to use models to not just say what the category is, but also give the reasoning of these, like, 100 transactions were categorized as X because of the following attributes, without giving them the rules to, without feeding the rules to the data, so to the algorithm. So that's, even though it's a pretty low level kind of process, the categorization, still generative AI is changing it. And the more downstream we go with, analysis and insights and recommendations, really helping make decisions. Yeah, thanks. That's a good switch, time to switch. Then generative AI becomes even more powerful, right? And giving some reasoning and identifying trends earlier on. I think that's where it becomes really powerful. So if you look at, you mentioned the strategy and the KPIs, and what needles can AI really move for the team. So I think it's, first of all, it's the time efficiency, right? We talked about it just in the last slide. Helping the team focus on value add tasks, and automating all the lower level tasks is a clear ROI. The second is efficiency, and that's what we see with the proactive insights and recommendations, right? The ability to leverage AI to help identify idle cash and more and better and more effective investment strategies, and reducing debt burdens is another area of focus. And the last is accuracy all over, right? So forecast accuracy. I'm actually with you, right? Like the forecast itself is a tool for decision making, and no one or another number of accuracy will quantify the level of decisions. But being able to run multiple scenarios easily without the need to do it on a manual basis, factoring in some external information, and getting some recommendations on that too is something that is huge with AI. So yeah, I think wrapping this up with some more applicable advice on how to apply AI effectively. I think it starts with the strategy, right? What are the KPIs that you're looking to move with AI? Are you looking to save time for the team? Are you looking to gain control? Are you looking to improve your ROI on your cash? And it can be more than one, right? That's it's important to know also. Then we go into talking about, okay, so do you have the right people to adopt these solutions? And it's a new development. Not necessarily the answer would be yes, but in that case, then choosing the right trusted advisor to help you make the change and adopt to this new reality is key. Then it goes into the implementation of it, right? So what are really the use cases? Are you looking to implement an AI-driven forecast, or do you want to start with just automated categorization and drive that KPI with AI? That's the third step. And then steps 4 to 7 are all about the data, and that's important to talk about that too, right? Because eventually the smartest AI, and it doesn't matter if it's machine learning models or generative AI, it uses data, right? So if you don't have the right data, if the data is not clean, if it's garbage in, then you get garbage out. If it's not timely, if you don't have it in real time and you have lagging data, then your ability to leverage AI to make decisions will be hindered. And you want as much of historical data as you can get, because eventually to identify patterns, if you have a lot of seasonality in your business, but you're only looking at a few months of data, then no algorithm will be able to identify that. So ticking all these boxes and making sure you have high quality data to implement AI on top of is also critical.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, I'm just going to add in here. I probably should have had a couple bullet points about having the right partner. So I've had many discussions last year at Treasury conferences about, okay, we have several people that were sold, about how AI is magic. And so they were oversold, I would say, a little bit. So really having the right partner who understands, right, what you're using AI for and the value, and can really explain that to you, the value of that, and gives you what they call customer service. I think that's really important. So using the right partner when implementing technology tools is something that I should have mentioned earlier. So let's pivot to some survey results. So let's talk about kind of the current state of the union. So we'll start with AI and Treasury. So we have some results from surveys. I have the sources of a few different surveys. So if you'd like a copy of the presentation, you can click on those, and there are some great surveys that you should look at, especially the one that Noam will be reviewing for us a little bit later. So familiarity with AI tools, just to kind of level set. This was from 2024. We have corporations, right? Generative AI and AI, not too much about it, but potential of AI and Treasury and finance, right? We had somewhat familiar, right? We only had 7% very familiar, and then we still had 38% not familiar. I'll be really interested to see how those numbers pivot, right? Maybe I'll do the survey again next year. And then we have the actual use, right? So we have personally, there's a gap between personally and work. So work's a little bit below, which I think is perfectly fine. We need to start looking at, especially for a treasury leader, what is our governance, right? So we talked about clear use cases, but we really need to have that policy and make sure that we don't have treasury team members off, right, putting our data in these tools and getting carried away with everything AI and think they have to use AI to tie their shoes and things like that. So I think that's something that we need to be mindful of as well. And then we see testing but not implemented, 26%. So just some interesting data on the familiarity and use. Anything stand out to you here, Noam, you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on its head with, the useful work is always lagging the personal use, and we see it here, and it's clear to see that the 33% will quickly turn into the 54% and even higher. But you also made a really good point that it's not just adopting a new technology. There are actually security implications and governance and compliance that because of how especially generative AI models work. These considerations should be top of mind, and I think that goes back to choosing the right partner, right? So you don't just need to identify the use cases, but you also need to set the guardrails to make sure that you're not exposing any information that shouldn't be exposed, or making any mistakes with that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And then this is from a different slide. If you haven't had a chance to look at this, this is a great survey by the AFP, covers everything Treasury pretty much from A to Z. So they have their AFP Treasury benchmarking survey report. So that is a really good read. So apologize, this slide is a little bit dense, and so that's why I always offer folks the opportunity to get the slide deck, but also we will make the recording available to you. Our friends at Panax will make that available to you, I believe, on their website. So you might be able to get a little more context and then actually share the slides and the recording with your teams as well and colleagues. And so we'll kind of a look, and we'll just focus on a few things here. We'll focus on machine learning and artificial intelligence. So we see implemented to some extent. Machine learning is 18%, AI is 23%. I would have expected those to possibly be reversed, but what we really see is there's still a big amount here in 48% and 37% where not implemented and have no plans to do so. And then the other part I found interesting was the RPA as well. So just to get a handle on the slide and not get overwhelmed by too much information, the takeaway is robotics process automation, that's RPA. We have machine learning, which is ML, and then artificial intelligence is AI. Anything here you want to touch on?
Yeah, what strikes me the most about this slide is the orange blocks of machine learning and artificial
Yeah.
intelligence, right? So basically, over 30 and almost 40% of respondents are going to implement AI solutions in the next 1 or 2 years, and I think that resonates pretty nicely with with the survey that we ran here at the beginning, right? That still the majority haven't implemented, but this speaks to the intentions and the value that folks see and want to implement and bring into their processes. So I think that was super interesting for me.
Right. And then also just to make the point that those on the call. So just to show that there is momentum, right, for the adoption so that you're a treasury professional, the other companies, your treasury peers are going to be adopting this technology in today's day and age with the cost and ease of use. There's no reason for your company not to be on the cutting edge of best practices. And then another interesting part, which I got from the survey, one of many, was what are some of the roadblocks experienced when implementing technologies, right, within the Treasury Department. So as we upgrade our Treasury tech staff, what we found, a few things were surprising to me. The cost of implementation is extremely high, which I find a little bit strange given today's world. And that's something that companies are doing a lot better at with companies such as Panax. I'll let Noam touch on that in a little bit and say why that doesn't need to be the case. And then we see another thing that stuck out to me was IT staff. So really, in a lot of the solutions like Panax, you don't really need to have your IT staff really necessarily all that involved. So it can actually lower the burden on your IT staff instead of raising it. So that is a huge component of the value proposition as well. And then it's weird that their steep learning curve is still so high given the state of solutions that we have now. So Noam, let me go ahead and bring you in here and maybe dovetail on a few of my comments, and then I want to know if anything else stuck out to you here.
Yeah, I think that those roadblocks were exactly what I felt when I was looking for a solution a few years ago. So the need for skilled IT staff and the cost of implementation. And you're exactly right, right? We started Panax because we couldn't get over that hurdle, but we saw a better way, and with the use of AI and API first technology, we're able to provide a lighter, faster solution, and without the barrier of IT and cost of implementation. The other thing that really struck me on this slide is actually a very positive development. It's the percentage of people that are worrying about job displacement that has dropped from, in the past over 30% worried about that when thinking about implementing technologies, whereas now that number has dropped to less than 20. And I think that talks about, there was some fear of adoption and hesitation with which is natural with new developments, and I think the more companies adopt solutions and are getting familiarized with how to work with these technologies and actually how to leverage them and make them better and more efficient, I expect to see that concern continuing to drop, and I think that's good news that it's already showing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So on the job displacement point, and I've been talking about this as loud a voice as possible and as often as possible, is technology is absolutely an opportunity for us to redefine our value proposition. So it shouldn't be feared. And then in the survey results that I've had the last 5 years, I'm showing that treasury teams are actually hiring. So I'm not seeing that job displacement. So there's actually growth. Of course, we need to be on top of our game in terms of technology, but it's good to see that we are embracing that as a profession and realizing this is an opportunity for us. So let's go ahead and pivot to the AI and automation and cash management survey results. that Panax is so kind to share with us today. So before we dive into the demographics, can you give us a little bit about the motivation for the survey, Noam, and a little background on it before we jump into the
Sure.
demographics?
Yeah, of course. So we reached out to over 200 finance and treasury professionals from various industries and sizes of companies, and our goal was to get a better sense of the sentiment, right? A lot of the points that Ernie shared in the previous slides, but we wanted to also ask those questions ourselves to understand what are the major concerns, what are the major benefits that people see. So it was really a pretty broad survey, right? So we can go briefly and the full results are also on our website if you're interested, or feel free to reach out and we'll share them with you. But really, it's we went across geographies. This is different job titles, so anyone from controllers that manage treasury to company sizes that are mostly in the mid-size, but also some are even larger and some are smaller, and really across industries, right? So not focusing on any specific industry. And basically, our focus was what are the three main benefits, and we see here something that I thought was surprising is that it's pretty evenly spread, right? And people see advantages in anywhere from audit and compliance to cash flow forecasting, which we talked a lot about in this survey, and transaction categorization and reconciliation, and all the way down to AP and AR, which are granted are lower, but still there was no one application that stood out, which to me says more about the possibility of improving many different processes, right, as opposed to one. Ernie, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I have a couple thoughts. There's a lot to unpack here. So I'm a little surprised that AI and compliance is highest there. I know it's a top three areas, but that's a little bit higher than I would expected. I would have hoped to see AP and AR a little bit higher, and I know those on the webinar will rank this in their top three AI benefits because collaboration is so important, and there is AP and AR have a huge impact on cash management success. So I would have liked to have seen that a bit higher. And then treasury management was not in the top three, which I thought was a little bit, I don't know, a little bit not quite what I expected. So I would have expected, reconciliation to be a little higher, and I would have expected more on the efficiency side uh, to be a little higher, and then that cash flow forecasting number I would have expected to be even more kind of off the charts, so to speak, uh, uh, as we go there. So the biggest one for me is again AP and AR. So I think to me that speaks to when we're looking at the benefits of how to quantify adoption of AI in Treasury, we need to really consider the value brought to AP and AR through better predictability of our payments, so cash forecasting, how it helps us make better decisions. So we should quantify that, right? This information made me have less borrowing costs. This information kept me from making an FX transaction that I really didn't need to make. This information um, helped me lower some other areas. So we can put the cost, the benefit behind that as well. So we need to be able to quantify that. So no, let me ask you back to you. Are there any areas, so when you're helping potential clients go through the business case, are there areas that they seem to not think about as much, and you guys really help them with a certain dimension of the ROI they might not be looking at top of mind?
Yeah, I think one tricky part is quantifying the time saved, right? Because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if professionals invest whatever time they have, right, the plate is always full, right? So it's tricky to quantify the time saved and comparing apples to apples, right? Because if they tell you, I spend X amount of time doing the forecast or categorizing transactions, but the amount that they invest is how much they have to invest, and comparing that with AI algorithms that run in the background and continuously monitor and do it in real time, right, and not in a lagging way, is a bit tricky to compare, right, because it's apples to oranges, right? If you do your reconciliations once a week, or actualize the forecast every couple of weeks, and it's hard to compare that to something that's always up to date and in real time, and the value of having that is something that is still some customers really can easily see it and see the advantage. And I think it goes back to the context of the world today and the uncertainty and ambiguity that we live in, and the need to have it in real time. But at the very simple math of that is a bit more tricky for some folks.
Yeah, I think the other part that I think people might have a little bit of a issue with is, let's say we're looking at for a treasury, right, investment. Say we don't have maybe a CFO stack type perspective. So really, transaction categorization goes across multiple places outside of treasury. So we need to look at we need to get a sense of how much time are they spending, right? This in treasury. So we need to start looking at, okay, how much time is saved across AP or AR, then what are the hourly rates on that sense, but and especially on reconciliation side of it. And then I guess reconciliation, I don't know, Cash App falls somewhere in here. I tell my Cash App story all the time. I had a Cash App. We had a big customer. It took her like 5 days to just apply the payment. So, those are areas that are huge. So companies need to really look at all the dimensions of those benefits. So let's go ahead and take a peek at some of the top concerns.
Yeah, so the flip side of the benefits that people see is what are the main concerns. So I think it's to me it wasn't surprising that making sure that you're adhering to the regulation and compliance requirement, and we talked about the privacy concerns is no surprise to me that was number one. Cost of implementation, yeah, it's also surprising, but I think it speaks to the survey that you shared before, and there's some misconceptions around that. And the third one is data reliability, and I think that we also covered that with the need to have to feed the basic data that you have at a high enough level, and otherwise, and especially with lack of explainability, it's hard to trust data, right? And it's hard to kind of give the freedom to the AI algorithms to do an analysis and make decisions for you. So I think that's a very valid concern that is important to address, and make sure that the data is full, and that the application of AI is in a good area and a relevant area.
Yeah, thanks. Let me go ahead and make a couple things that really stick out to me here. So I think kind of in looking at these are all questions, right, that you should be asking of your potential technology partners, right? And I like to see the regulatory compliance was already so high, right? So I think that's getting more complex, as we've already mentioned. And I'm also glad to see, consistent with the other survey results, that job displacement wasn't as big a concern as I like. But I start to see that, okay, with a good conversation, right? Reliability, privacy and security, what that means, all the SOC2 and all that good stuff. So I think that was really compelling as well. So why don't you just go ahead? Can you share with us just a few like key takeaways from for the survey that you'd like our attendees to get?
Yeah, I think the picture is pretty clear. The way we see it is that there is a mix of excitement and real applications that people want to see and adopt, but at the same time there are quite significant concerns, and I think bridging these two worlds and implementing solutions in ways where they can move the needle and without taking any unnecessary risk is the path that we're trying to help our customers walk, and I'm excited to see more and more companies adopt solutions that have significant ROI for the KPIs that they define, and in ways that don't put them at risk.
All right, thank you very much. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a polling question. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have some key takeaways, and then we're going to wrap things up with a few of the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the final polling question here. So again, if you're interested in receiving a certificate of attendance, you'll need to answer all of our polling questions today. I would sincerely appreciate everyone's consideration in answering all of our polling question, not only for my benefit, but for that of my strategic partner, Panax, as well. I couldn't do what I do without amazing partners with Panax. So if you can just please give me a few seconds and go ahead and answer the polling question, I would sincerely appreciate that as well. And again, if you have any questions, as I previously mentioned, go ahead and drop those in the questions or chat area, and we'll get to those if we have time. If not, we'll follow up with you afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the NCAA March Madness. We'll give you a few more seconds to make sure you get that polling question answered. I know there's a little bit of a lag sometimes. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I appreciate everyone's consideration in answering the polling question. So that's some key takeaways here, just to really put a fine point on it. You really do well to define cash management success and the role of technology in achieving success. I like what Noam just said. She likes to walk before you run. You should assess your technology by identifying areas where you can mitigate time spent on non-value add activities and more strategic value. So I think the machine learning piece and the RPA is really good on the time spent non-value add task, and then the strategic value. Obviously, it has value, but when we get it in generative AI, that's where we really see some things on the strategic value side. And then you should discover how AI is being used, right? Or it is being used in your current systems, and then the value that it does or can deliver. So that gets back to this AI strategy. So that should be consistent within Treasury, but also across Treasury and also across your organization. This is an opportunity to take a little bit of a strategic role. If your finance department or your whole company doesn't have an AI strategy in place, that's somewhere where you can take a little bit of a leadership role, an opportunity to get a seat at the strategic table. You should prioritize upgrading or investing in new systems that deliver related functionality that deliver the most value. So AI is not magic. You need to right size that. You need to have the right perspective in that, the right metrics in place, and you need to monitor those metrics, but also communicate those metrics on a proactive basis. And then we also need to focus on right sizing the professional development of yourself and your team. You don't want to get overwhelmed, but you don't want to get left behind. And your soft skills are incredibly important, not only your own, but those of your team as well. So let me go ahead and just ask a few questions of Noam. We have an opportunity to tap into her expertise. Noam, are you seeing any specific industries where you're getting more inquiries or customer bases? Are there any industries where you see
Repeat myself. Basically, I said that we see it across the board and across industries. One thing that was surprising to me at first is that we actually see a lot of mandates from boards, from managements to adopt specifically AI solutions as kind of a top-down requirement, which is, it's kind of against the logic that we spoke about in this webinar, right? To start from the people, the process, and then find the solutions. But I think, because AI is disrupting industries all over, then it also makes sense that the need to actually assess it from the other side too, to make sure that AI can be of value and specifically be adopted in Treasury is something that we see. And one thing that we've heard, especially across the CFO stack, is that Treasury is one of the first places that departments choose to start with, because it's not as necessarily as integrated with the accounting processes and other parts of areas. Even though we spoke about AP and AR in this session too, so it's a good place to start. And there's a lot of data, there are a lot of processes to automate. So we see quite a lot of folks expressing interest specifically in AI tools for Treasury.
Okay, just one more question for you, Noam, real quick, then we'll make a few closing comments. So, in terms of the questions that you get, from your prospecting and then your clients, can you share with us a few common questions that you often get, and you might see those as misperceptions that people have or hesitations that folks have that you might be able to help our folks kind of get over or just be like a little bit more, put them at ease a little bit?
Yeah, I think and it was also pretty nicely showed in the slides that you shared. The cost of implementation, the length of implementation is a very common
Okay.
worry that we help address and make and ensure that it's a pretty seamless process and there's no IT burden at all for our customers. The second is the data security and reliability, and that's something that we're taking the best measures to ensure security, and we have all the different accreditations and answer all the different concerns, and it's a valid concern, and I'm actually happy when customers drill down and to make sure that worry that's in place. And the third is the data reliability and the ability to really trust these processes, and I can share that a lot of the ways we implement AI in our product are more as recommendations, as more of a co-pilot, an advisor, and not as something that runs and makes changes and decisions without any supervision. I think the world is getting to that place too, right? That the technology is advancing, but I think you said it before. We need to walk before we run. So that's what we're in the process of with our customers. Helping them learn how to walk the AI walk before they run.
Uh, Thank you so much, Noam, not only for those insights, but thank you so much for making the time to be on our webinar today. We really appreciate your insights. Also want to thank Panax. Excited to have you on future events and as a strategic partner. And one thing I forgot to mention up front, Panax not only shares my commitment to thought leadership, but also shares a commitment to the professional success of those who use their product. So, Noam, any final words you'd like to share with our audience at all?
No, I think it was a really interesting session. Thank you for having me, and thank you for showing all the research, and not only our research, but also other surveys. And looking forward to what's ahead. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Noam. I just want to mention the link to the survey we talked about in Panics is in the hyperlink of any of the slides. And also, if you're not aware, the Treasury Truth or Dare podcast is live. So if you haven't done so, please go ahead and check that out. If you're interested in being a guest or knowing someone that will be a great guest, please go ahead and let me know. Would love to have you on there and have your colleagues as well. And in closing, please, please have the courage to live your treasury truths and dare to be great in everything that you do within and beyond treasury.